Good morning. Is it still morning?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So I like that we're going to do this right before you eat, because I'm sure this will be great for your digestion. I'm Candace Beeke. It's a pleasure to be here. We're going to have a conversation about the state of our downtown, the state of our region. It's emotionally charged, as it should be, because we all care about where we come from. But it's an important conversation to have. And I would ask that you listen to the viewpoints and be open to these ideas and thoughts and opinions, because they're all very relevant. This is a tough challenge that we face, and we need all the voices at the table. So let's start by learning a little bit about our panel. We'll go in alphabetical order. Buchanan. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your business. Tell us about where you come from in the world, and why you choose to live and work in the Portland area.
I'm gonna be great and not answer the question first.
Oh, great, super.
But I just want everyone to acknowledge that we've got an awesome panel here. So I want to give kudos here. Michelle runs a B Corp with DHM Research. Monique runs Greater Portland Inc., which is really making sure that our businesses stay here and thrive here and recruit other businesses here, and really looks at the region and how the region can win, which is the premise of this panel, of the tension between downtown Portland and a lot of business, or the perception that a lot of business owners are fleeing to the suburbs or further away. And then Candace, who's the publisher of the Portland Business Journal, I think it's a great collaboration, which B Local PDX is really all about, to extend kind of the B Corp movement into circles maybe that we haven't been before. So with that, I started, it was Email ROI, then eROI, now Thesis. I started it 20 years ago. And we are a digital marketing agency working with companies like Nike and Spotify and other consumer brands. And we're about 360 plus employees. We'll get to some of the other stuff of building an office building and things like that in Slabtown. But I also started a nonprofit called Emerging Leaders and PDX, and we have collaborated and kind of placed over 700 college students of color at about 150 Portland businesses. About 20 of those are local B Corps here in this room. It's been really incredible. So I am a huge believer of having platforms for good and for engaging in the community, whether it's in downtown core or the suburbs.
And where are you from originally, Ryan?
From the suburbs of Washington, D.C. area. Grew up there, went to University of Virginia, and then worked summers in Oregon.
And just one more question. As you were building your business to what it is now, where has it been located? What has the physical location looked like?
We've always been in the downtown core, whether it's in Old Town for most of that. And then we, about 4 years ago, subleased from the Vestas building in the Pearl. And then we're building a brand new building from the ground up in the edge of Slabtown.
Great, thank you. Okay, going alphabetically, so we're gonna jump to Monique. Tell us about yourself, tell us about GPI and where you came from, where you grew up.
Yeah, so I oversee Greater Portland Inc., and we're responsible, as Ryan said, for attracting, expanding traded sector businesses in the region, and then we also coordinate the regional strategy. And I'm from Detroit, and I was doing economic development, working in economic development in Detroit at a time where there was an auto bailout, the largest municipal bankruptcy in the country, and we were still able to successfully recruit, retain traded sector businesses to the region. And so that attracted me to the role at Greater Portland Inc. because I saw some parallels with negative press, downtowns, branding deterioration. And I'm still here because I think there's still opportunities. I'm not from here, I can leave whenever I choose to, but Portland has become home because I'm bullish on the opportunities here for myself as well as for my children.
How long have you been in Oregon?
So I've been in Oregon 5 years now, and so pre-pandemic. And so when I first came here, I remember saying, how tolerant do I have to be when I saw people on the streets? And I was constantly being told, you just gotta be more tolerant, you just gotta be more tolerant. I'm like, how tolerant? And so when I look at the pandemic, and again, being an outsider, to me, it was something that was already here. And it's not the pandemic that brought this, if you're not from here. You know, when I tell people I'm from here, before I moved here, it was, you're going to Portland, it's dirty. So the idea that this was this vibrant, bubbly, great place, I think it's in the eye of the beholder, honestly.
And I moved here in September 2020 from New Mexico. I'm originally from Michigan, like Monique, but I came from Albuquerque, which struggles a lot with its downtown, with perception, with crime, a lot of the same issues that, a smaller scale that you saw in Detroit. Michelle, with N, you get to be the last speaker. Interesting. Tell us about yourself, tell us about your company, and how long you've been in the area.
Great, thank you. So, Michelle Neiss, President, DHM Research. We do public opinion research, and DHM, it's changed names over the years, but the company has really been here in Portland for over 40 years. So just a nice long longevity in this place. And I personally grew up in Montana, as one of our previous speakers as well, not that far from there actually. And came to Oregon in high school, moved around a lot, back and forth, but eventually married an Oregon guy and came here to settle. And the marriage has ended, but the roots that my family put down here are still here. It's a beautiful place.
Wonderful. And where is your office located?
Our office is in Lake Oswego, downtown.
So for the next question, I wanted to dig into some data. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of factors that play into business choices right now about where they locate. Multnomah County is one of the highest taxed places in the country. We have an ongoing homeless crisis. We have concerns about public safety. And Portland and Oregon are among the top remote workplaces in the nation. So all of those factors, I think it's fair to say, are at play here when businesses are deciding their next phase of where they locate. So Monique, I thought I'd start with you, and then Michelle. What data are you seeing that helps inform you about what's happening in our community?
Yeah, so I did a little research before in preparing, and downtown Portland's recovery's been at 41%. And so we say like, oh wow, like we're not near half of where we used to be, but in reality, San Francisco's at 31%, Detroit's at 42%, Chicago 43%, Vancouver, BC at 45%. And so to me, it just shows that other regions and other cities are facing similar challenges. And again, we think we're in this fishbowl, but realistically, we're really on par with other regions that we're often compared to. Our downtown central business district vacancy rate for office space is 21% compared to the surrounding metro area at 12%. So it's true, companies are taking a smaller footprint in downtown versus the suburbs or the surrounding area, but overall, city to city, we're really on par with other metropolitans.
And Michelle, did you have some data on public perception around downtown?
Right, so I love hearing Monique's data because that gives us this really concrete picture of what's actually happening, which is different than what I look at, of course, because I'm looking at the perception that people have. And for sure, I think we can see in our work that people have a lot of concerns around downtown Portland, around safety, and that the concerns about public safety have really skyrocketed in the last 3 years, kind of during the pandemic. And so that concern creates sort of a momentum in a conversation, right? That's that perception piece. and trying to balance it with what is happening with the business is an important perspective. I also think it's important to realize that people's perception is based on their experiences too. When they go downtown and they see things, and when we ask what they'd like to see, like what would make them more interested in going downtown, it's often things that are very doable. You know, cleaning up trash, keeping it pleasant. Those are things that we can definitely address.
I want to dig in just a little bit on the public safety aspect and the idea of perception versus reality. Are we less safe downtown than we were a year or two ago? Do we have data that speaks to how true the perception is?
Yeah, I pulled that up and it's all online, open source with the Police Bureau. And if you look at August this year versus August, it's up, great. So this is August 2017. There were 606 reported crimes. And then on the right side, you can see like a breakdown of that. And then again, this is reported, so that's really all we can go by. And you can see like a heat map of where some of the crimes took place 5 years ago, again in the central business district. And then if you go to the next slide, it's actually 507, so it's less. It's less. And again, this is month to month. You can pull whatever month. But overall, crime has actually gone down in 5 years. What's interesting, though, when you look at the type of crimes, if we go to the next slide, it's vandalism. Vandalism is 3 times higher.
And I think that tracks with what we see and hear, broken windows and graffiti and charges like that. But I agree, we can only go with what's reported. Lots of us know people who have had issues downtown that they didn't report. So we can say it's not as high as, we just don't know how to compare that with 5 years ago.
Right, and so that would be aggravated assault. It's the same number, 29 to 29. And I did look, I was like, is there an error here? Like, how is it the exact on par? But I think vandalism is up, but overall, for us to just say, crime is so much higher, and it's like, well, actually, the data says it's not, right? The data says it's not. And then if we go back to the next slide, you can see the heat map where crime is really in a couple of different places, whereas in the previous slide, the red heat, it was kind of spread out all over. So you can see a concentrated area of perhaps where this vandalism and some of the crimes are being reported and where they're happening. Why that is, I don't know, and I think that's where, you do need to look at deeper research to say, why has vandalism gone up? Why in these particular areas? And then address that. But overall crime is down in downtown.
One thing I'll add just to zoom out a little bit is, if you look at, I'm speaking to kind of our collective responsibility as non-elected officials, because I don't think Congressman Blumenauer is here anymore. I'm very inspired by him. But if you look at the history of America, in the 50s, we changed the systems to where we paid tax dollars into the government, and we abdicated our responsibility, our personal responsibility, to be part of solving some of these issues, to be engaged in the community. And a lot of, and this is more my thought of like the data is really helpful to root ourselves in, but so much of how we behave as humans is emotionally driven, and it's the conversations that we have with our friends at home, with other business leaders in the community. And a lot of it is the notion that it's almost like the law of gravity, that government has to solve this on their own, and that we can absolve ourselves of this because we pay taxes. And that model is pretty broken. I think of course we need to hold our public officials accountable, for sure. But as leaders in the community, I also think we have a huge responsibility. And I have a lot of guilt that I'm definitely not doing enough, but I do think that there is an element of I can get lazy in conversations with my friends and just buy into all of the negativity around Portland. And I think it takes a little discipline to have the data on hand to bring to those conversations.
I want to stay with you for a minute, Ryan, and talk about your recent decision to build your new building in Slabtown. Will you tell us about that decision, the factors, what went through your head, what were the things that worried you, excited you?
Yeah, well, I think today's event that we're all at has, several tracks, and our panel is, and one of the main points of it is, how are we listening to our employees, and how are we investing not only in our employees but in place? So there's a couple things. One, Slabtown is, you brought up the data before showing certain areas of the city, like in the downtown core, where our employees, do have a lot of, whether they're emotionally driven or factual, there would be significant safety concerns, especially when we were in Old Town, that came up again and again, and that was 5 years ago. So Slabtown, and the building that we're building, ironically, as an email marketing company, we're displacing the U.S. Postal Service there, snail mail, with a kind of an outdated small post office that was there. We're building a 41,000 square foot building. It is a very personal decision because it is a significant amount of putting all of my chips on the table there. But there's a bunch of things that go into play. One, our employees are located and do want the walkability of what that neighborhood provides. There is more of a sense of community and safety in that neighborhood. It definitely is a risk. There's so much uncertainty of when are people gonna, really come back into the office, when, what is happening with the pandemic, the market, there's so much to say that would give me and our bank and other things reason to say, no, let's pull the plug on this, let's bail. But I do think ultimately what's driving it is to be able to attract world-class creative talent. And I believe that our employees, and we've heard from them again and again, they want the choice to come in, collaborate. We are a very human-driven agency. We like people, so our end product is going to be a lot better if we can have, as we observe from this, I'm getting a lot more out of this in-person event today and I'm very much a people person, than necessarily an all virtual event. So I just think people are really craving that and want that choice and want that feeling of togetherness. And we, like I mentioned in the Business Journal article that you all covered, I do think we would have lost a lot of our employees if we had built that in Hillsborough or built that, way outside of the Portland region.
Okay. Michelle, Quinn Thomas, which owns DHM, just invested in new digs in Lake Oswego. I know that was not a DHM decision, it was a Quinn Thomas, but what can you tell us about why that choice was made, what it means to employees, what it means to the community?
Right. So Quinn Thomas was located in the Lake Oswego area before, and as their team has grown and they acquired DHM, and then the pandemic happened, you're grappling with those issues that Ryan's just talking about, right? So not everyone's coming to work anymore, but we still want the flexibility of having a space to collaborate in person. And so the office was moved to a downtown Lake Oswego and built as sort of a co-working space, right? So it's very flexible in how we can use the space, and then provided that walkability that employees want, because really that was a key amenity in what employees wanted from a place to work, is that they could have a good coffee shop and a good lunch place just down the, you know, and yes, we can stock them with food in the fridge, food and drinks, but the ability to leave the office and have a pleasant place to go to was important.
And was DHM based downtown before that? Where was DHM?
We were prior to the pandemic. We were in the Pearl, and then we went all virtual. We're a small team. I have 11 people total. We tried a traditional co-working space just on MLK, and for whatever reason, it was the employees often felt uncomfortable doing collaborative work in a co-working space because you have other people there using the space, and you might feel that like we're being loud, or quite a bit of our conversations are actually confidential, and so a traditional co-working space was a little bit difficult to manage, and so in this case, it's a co-working space with one other company, and we can still feel like we have. It's very easy to get the conference room if you're having or the Zoom room if you're having a confidential conversation. Yeah.
Okay, it's more just siblings having to get along rather than, I got it.
Yes, and it's more comfortable if you get to know the people that you see there.
So I want to come back to, we have a question about when will downtown come back, but I want to stay on this topic about what factors help to make the decision about where you locate. So Ryan, we're going to pick on you. We hear a lot about, let me just say it from my perspective, we write a lot about crime and homelessness being the driving factors behind companies' decisions on whether they're going to be in the core or not be in the core. What role do taxes play in that? So can you speak to what role did taxes play in where you chose to locate?
Yeah, I think it's painful to pay 4% more and get less services. I think that is a very prominent feeling among, through the nonprofit Emerging Leaders, I'm constantly interacting with probably 100 to 200 business owners, and so I have these conversations a lot, and that conversation comes up again and again and again. For me, our product is our people, and it is, that 4% is totally okay with me to support preschool for all, to support where the services, where that money will ultimately hopefully make a dent in housing accessibility and homelessness. So from a business strategy perspective, my employees tend to be younger and they tend to really want to gravitate to the area that we are in, which is close in Portland. So it's worth it. That was a really long way of saying great. It's worth it.
Monique, do you have any information on how much the taxes factor into business decisions?
Well, some companies want us to do that analysis, and we'll work with a CPA firm that's a part of GPI to give that to them. Others, it's just a single data point, and other things matter. And again, it's a constant marginal cost versus marginal benefit analysis, where in Ryan's case, that cost doesn't outweigh the benefit of that 4%, right? And so we see that across the board with companies that are considering the market.
And just to be clear, what is the 4% you're referencing? That's the difference between...
So there are new taxes in Multnomah County, and I'm very oversimplifying it. I think it's like something around 1.5 of that 4% is preschool for all, and like 2.5% is to go towards subsidizing housing.
But versus it's 4% more than other counties?
Yeah, than outside of the Tri-County area. So I've seen a lot of entrepreneur friends move to Bend, move there, and they're mainly remote. So the mobility of companies, and Monique, you can speak to this too, I've seen even one entrepreneur move out of state to Idaho or Montana and or Texas, and they have 200-300 employees, and it's like a slow trickle at first before maybe a year or two later, you might see several hundred employees move with them. This is all the emotional, non-data, and that's why I'm so glad I have two data people here, that there is a feeling like there is, whether it's white flight or whatever it is, that there are a lot of people moving out of the city to either the suburbs or somewhere else in Oregon, which all that's a win to me, but it's when companies start moving out of state that I think it really hurts our economy here.
Okay. I will add one more piece of data to this, that we recently did a study with JLL. They commissioned Portland Business Journal to research our readers about, in part, some questions about their concerns around downtown. And one of the most disturbing pieces of information was 1/3 of the executives who responded are considering moving their business out of downtown, which is a very, very high number. But when we asked them why, and we gave them many different options to choose from, homelessness was in the mix, public safety was in the mix, local leadership or the lack thereof was called out. The number one by far was taxes. The number one reason they were making the decision or might make the decision was taxes, was money. I just think that's an important thing to put out there, because I have been told by commercial realtors that what they're told privately is sometimes different than what the company will tell the media about why they chose to leave. So there's perception and then there's accuracy. So let's talk a little bit about downtown. When do we think it's going to go back to the way people think it was, remember it being thriving, no concerns about who's open for lunch downtown, how do you find a restaurant? When's it going to come back? Look in your crystal ball, what needs to happen?
Should start with the
And I'm going to be sure I write this all in the paper and I attribute it to you, so get it right.
If we all knew that, we would be investing and we would be setting our clock to become multi-millionaires, right? I don't think we know it. No one knows when that will be. But I think the question should be not when it will come back, but how we should start reimagining downtowns, right? Whereas before, we know live, work, play, it was a big emphasis on work for downtowns. And I think the future of downtowns is less work, and it's going to be more about play, live to a certain extent, and work, less. And so when will downtown come back? I think we should be asking, when do we want to reimagine and reinvest in a downtown that has more vibrancy, that puts more of an emphasis on the play? And I think when we do that, that's when we'll see a downtown be vibrant, not necessarily come back or go back to what it used to be.
I love that idea. I think a couple of things to add to that. When companies make decisions like we made with Slabtown, yes, we're listening closely to our employees. A couple things. One, we're competing with employees, being in their pajamas and walking their dogs and doing all the things that I love doing too, when I can work remotely, 2 to 3 days out of the 5 days a week. So work has to feel more like home and feel like the park is, 2 blocks away. You have to go all in on that. I also think there is an element, everything's personal, like the ownership of companies. I'll take mine right here. My house is 7 blocks from here. I like to bike everywhere. I'm not gonna bike out to Hillsborough or Beaverton. Like, I wanna find an office where I can bike 3 miles to. That is a way bigger factor than people give it credit for. So I think that the element of play and livability is so huge, because I think a lot of us are coming to the realization we are never going to go back in time. That's not something that is, it's like trying to put the internet back in the bottle. Like, it's not gonna happen. We also, we need to, look at some of the silver linings that we do have here. I think there are, from our employees, we have, at Thesis, we're about 42% folks of color at all levels of the company, and the more conversations that I have with our employees of color, they're like, yeah, I actually see a lot more people who look like me in the downtown core, and it feels more welcoming. That is not something that was maybe there 3 years ago in those conversations. So I do think that there are none of those silver lining kinds of parts of the conversation about how Portland has adapted are in the conversations that I have at cocktail parties. So I think there are a lot more silver linings that we can focus on, and maybe we come up with more that we've heard. But I think the way that Portland is adapting, we can look at some of the good things and really amplify those instead of only looking at the bad things and talking about those.
I want to talk a little bit more about this vision of what downtown could be, Monique, and that idea. Can suburbs thrive, like Lake Oswego and Beaverton and Tigard? Can they thrive if the downtown core isn't thriving? And I understand we may have a different definition of what thriving looks like than how it has been defined. But however you define a thriving downtown, there's restaurants, there's retail, there's experiences, it's safe. If that doesn't exist, can the suburbs still thrive?
I think so. As I mentioned, I'm from Detroit, and so that was Detroit up until 10 years ago, where you had thriving suburbs and, a ghost town of a downtown. So I do think you can have that, but in cities and urban planning, it ebbs and flows, and there are trends over years. And so, it's the suburbs are up a couple of decades, and then it's the downtowns. And so, not sure if that's the trend now that's happening here in this region, where we're gonna see a flip and we start seeing more of the suburbs thrive. But I do think, again, coin is gonna flip again, and people will say, there's money to be made downtown, the price is low, let me buy. And then everyone, moves back into the city.
I find that a hard question to answer. I think it's more, I just see the suburbs and the downtown are connected. And so what kind of a downtown do we want? I think that even before so many people, those who have the privilege to be working from home remotely, even before that, most people didn't work downtown. Most people are spread out over the whole region. And what brings them to downtown, what makes Portland interesting, is the character and all the things we have. The farmers market downtown, the Portland Thorns or Timbers, or whatever brings you downtown, or the theater. That's what's important, is just how do we make our whole area thrive. And so I don't really see it as an either or. I think it as we want to make this a really fun place to live.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, again, if you look at the brand of the Portland region, it is about quality of life. We can go for a hike, half hour in the gorge. We can bike in Forest Park, and hopefully we can work somewhere in there, and it's the whole region. And that's often because I was on the board of GPI about a decade ago, and when we looked at comparing the Portland region versus Albuquerque or versus other cities our size and a little bit bigger, that is what we were selling to other companies to move here. And I think we have such incredible, natural playlands in all the wilderness areas that are so easy to access. that is something that I'd love for us to continue to sell outside the region. We just need to fulfill on its promise by all being engaged in our communities.
I really don't know how this question is going to land, so we'll see if anyone wants to weigh on this. What effect might charter reform, which is coming up for a somewhat contested vote, have on the future of downtown and its attractiveness to companies?
I'll start. I think all of us here are all about systemic change. I think it's clear when the weak mayor system that we have was created, it was for a very, very small town that has gotten, we're now a city. We're now something that is much more complex. It seems like the data shows 80% or more of Portland are in favor of some form of charter reform. I definitely am. I think we need accountability. I think we need someone who knows the systems to be able to manage them and lead us. Do I think charter reform is going to pass in November, or is it going to push till the spring with Mingus maps and what that version of charter reform is? I don't know. I just want that change to happen, like really clearly.
And that's true of most people. Yeah. I mean, majority of people in the city of Portland want that to change. 88% say the current city council is ineffective. I mean, clearly there just needs to be change. And if the promise of that change is that there can be a more effective government leadership, you know, it's just, can we build on that and can we execute that to make the change? I think it's pretty clear that what we have right now feels ineffective to people.
Okay, final question, and we'll go in alphabetical order again. What's the number one thing you think our downtown needs to thrive again?
So, just to tell a quick story, I was at a Business Journal and workplace change event a couple weeks ago, and the number 2 person under the mayor was one of the panelists, and he told a story. Former Governor Kitzhaber was also on there, and so he was praising Kitzhaber's vision when he was governor. And then he told a story of how important vision was, and how JFK put a man on the moon, and he bumps into a janitor and it's like, why are you working at midnight here? And the janitor's like, well, I'm putting a man on the moon. Everyone was aligned to that vision. The context of that Portland city official was that how important vision was, but he had an opportunity to share what the vision was for Portland. And and coalesce 300 people in the room, a lot of leaders, to get behind that vision. I do think the data all supports that, whether it's emotional or factual, if it's taxes or whatever, but there is a strong perception that public safety is priority number 1, and a lot of the catch-all problem or most visible thing of that is homelessness. If we had a leader align us around a vision that was singularly focused on that, and we could all engage as private citizens to help with that, to clean up trash in the neighborhoods that we're going into in work or in play or where we live, that would be helpful. That would be helpful to do exactly what he wanted, but he didn't say what the vision was. So if someone's not going to say it, that is what I think the vision should be for this region, is to get all of us engaged to solve that. And I know there's 1,000 tentacles to help solve that, but that's what I would get around.
Okay.
I thought you were going to go in a different direction.
Oh, but go there.
I just think we need a cohesive plan, right? And so there's a vision, but you're saying, hey, let's pinpoint this, but I don't think we have a cohesive vision, a cohesive plan for the region. And I just, even know in our personal lives, if you don't have a plan for your life, you just blow with the wind. And that's what I see is happening now, that there's just not even a plan for the city. So that's what I think is the #1 priority and what we need.
Okay.
Yeah, those are great answers. At the end of the day, I think we need to tackle the big problems and solve them, and vision and plan, right? And it's pretty clear what the big problems are right now. It's it's houselessness, and public safety, right? I mean, that's what people are concerned about.
Okay. Please join me in thanking our panel for their candor.